the term silos. What IRV has done over the last few years in particular through the National Collaboration for Youth is meld those silos into a cooperative and collaborative community. The people that I'm pleased to have join me today in this segment and the segment to follow live in that world. Not only the world of research, but the world of collaboration for the benefit of our youth. So as you listen to their presentation, as you hear the diversity of the two daises in the next two sessions, think about your organization. If you are a member today of the National Collaboration for Youth, I advise you to be more proactive to everybody's benefit. If you are not, you should be. Your organization should be. Carry that message back with you at the end of the session. Whatever it takes, we're only going to build success together. With that, I want to introduce two individuals who are learned in research, work very hard for common cause, and most importantly to me, they happen to be both good friends. First, Michael Kahn. Michael Kahn is co-chairman of the National Council for Youth Research Group. He was the founding director of the Girl Scouts Research Institute. Deb Bolesky is the co-chair with Michael of the National Collaboration for Youth Research Group. Deb is the Director of Research and Chair of the Professional Development Center for the American Camp Association. I give you two friends, and I hope you enjoy the experience as much as your food.
Hello, everybody. Is the mic on? Okay, great. Can you hear me all right? Okay, good. Actually, there are three of us presenting today, but the federal shutdown hit this panel. Suzanne Lemenestrel, unfortunately for us, is a federal employee, and she was not able to join us. So I just want to give a shout out to her because she had a major influence on this presentation as well. And Deb was able to make it in from Colorado despite all the weather problems up there in Estes Park up in the mountains. So we're very fortunate. Otherwise, I would have been here alone representing the three of us, and that would have been a real problem. I wanted to just tell you what the sort of the bottom line of our presentation is today, and at the end, we'll also have a little bit of an interactive discussion that you can participate in. Hopefully by then you'll be finished with your lunch and be able to do that. But the bottom line of our presentation, the central idea is that out-of-school time programs contribute to academic success and engagement and workforce preparation, and that they do that through a few basic elements. And the three that we're going to highlight today are civic engagement, and Deb will get into more details on that later, and that was Suzanne's contribution. Skill development, which you heard some about earlier today, and the idea of youth-adult partnerships being one of the core practices of the work that youth development organizations do. So that's sort of the overview and the bottom line. Irv got up here this morning, and Ed just gave the National Collaboration for Youth another shout out. How many of you, again, are members of the National Collaboration for Youth from member organizations? Okay, so about a third. For those of you who are not, who potentially could be, I encourage you to get involved. It's a great collaborative group, and where many of the groups, the research group, the policy group, and the program group, all focus on how we can have the greatest joint collective impact for youth in this country. And for those of you who are not member orgs and maybe are not in a position to be, one of the things we want to talk about towards the end is how there can be collaborations where we build bridges across what we do to better benefit youth in this country. So as I said before, the arc of this presentation is based on Richard Lerner's work, and many of you may know Rich Lerner from Tufts. He and I graduated from the same graduate school, coincidentally, so I'm his instant buddy as a result. Those of you who know Rich would know why. And we're going to go through the civic engagement, life skills, youth-adult partnerships piece, and then come around at the end, as I said, to that discussion of why does this matter the most. So Deb, you want to take it away?
Sure. Pretend I am Suzanne Leministrel, and as those of you know Suzanne, she's much taller than me, so imagine a taller person sitting here.
And the two of you have great photos in the program, by the way.
Yes.
Especially Suzanne.
She looks very much
looks
like
like a book author,
a book
right?
author, but so I'm going to fill in for Suzanne, and we are sad she's not here because Suzanne was a great contributor to the information that we wanted to share around civic engagement. And she works with 4-H, and those of you that are familiar with 4-H know that they have a nice emphasis on civic engagement. So she brought that to the table. And let me say that as Michael and I and Suzanne, through me, talk, we are using the organizations that we have worked with to illustrate some of these points. It's not that it's only 4-H or it's only ACA or Girl Scouts or whatever, but we had to, we felt like we represented all of us in the collab, and we just had to speak from material that we were familiar with. So when Suzanne shared her notes around this idea of civic engagement, it is very much across the board, I think, in the way that 4-H thinks about civic engagement. And when she was talking about the terms about that, she said, you know, what we're trying to do is help youth develop a set of abilities that they can use to move beyond their own individual self-interest and now be more committed to the well-being of a larger group, a larger community that they're a member of. And I think that that definition works really well for many of us who are interested in this idea of civic engagement. And when we start looking at how that happens and what the focus is, you can see that there's many areas that you can choose to focus on. But within 4-H, the things that were kind of rose to the top, and that I think, again, cut across many of our organizations, is this idea of youth voice, advocacy, and activism. And that those are three really important aspects for youth to be exposed to and to learn about. And when you think about that, this whole idea of youth engagement, civic engagement, is that it becomes a strategy now. It becomes a strategy for community change, and I use the word community very broadly. It could be the community that the child lives in. It could be the community of camp. It could be the community of a particular kind of organization, as we just heard about, can even at times seem to have some kind of virtual community. But whether we're talking about neighborhood, school, whatever, it's this idea of these youth becoming change agents. And when you look at the work around this, there's sort of a continuum, and so you can find your spot along the continuum. And again, when we're starting to look at this, it's this idea of strategies for change. And when you start out at the closest end to us, but this idea of youth services approach, and trust me, this slide looks much bigger on our PowerPoint than what it might to you in the back. But when you look at that very first block there around youth services, that's sort of the continuum that's focused purely on youth as clients. It may be that it's around prevention, treatment, but that's the starting point on that end. And then if you look at the next block, it's youth development, where we try to put it within a more positive context. And it's caring adults, it's creating a safe environment, it's helping to create competencies within the youth. The idea that age appropriateness is important if we want to have a positive developmental experience for the children. And maybe one of the most important to me anyway is this idea of youth-adult partnerships. So that second place along the continuum is interested in those things. Some of you may say, well, we have that, but we also are real interested in leadership, and it's the authentic leadership opportunities for the youth. So that's that third spot that's in the middle there. And it's the idea now that you help provide experiences for those young people to become decision makers, problem solvers, and that this authentic leadership helps them feel more competent in being able to take on that role. The fourth one in the light blue reads as civic engagement, which is exactly what we're talking about here in this section. So it's all of those other pieces, but now it really is about helping the youth understand political awareness. And it's this idea that there are opportunities for them as young people to become social change agents, which can be a very empowering thought for a young person, and then to get engaged in that really, as you'll see in a video that we're going to see in just a minute here, a very almost transformational experience for some of the young people. And then the last one at the end there is youth organizing, and it's again all of these other pieces along the continuum, but now it's the ability to actually go out, organize, create sort of a base of other youth to help carry out a particular effort. And when we look at this idea of academic success, they've looked at youth who've been given opportunities for some kind of civic engagement experience and tried to see, well, how does that translate into academic success? Those of you that you may be familiar with a Davila and Morin study where they looked at kids that were involved in some kind of civic engagement experience and then looked at how they did academically. And the bottom line on that is that it worked for them. You know, they did have better academic success attributed back to this engagement that they were involved in. And things that they looked at in that study that I think is interesting to think about is that if you're going to do this, there are things that you have to be aware of. Developmental timing is important. The readiness of the youth to take on something like this. How long are they engaged in this? Does length make a difference? You know, that idea of duration and intensity always crops up. And then the idea that you have to have a good match, so that if you have aspects in the program that you are trying to build on, that there's a good match between what you're trying to do in that program and where that young person is developmentally and being able to carry that on. So we are going to see a short clip. We thought while you're eating lunch you might enjoy watching something else besides listening to Michael and I. And
Hold the video for a second.
And what we're going to do is take a clip that did come from 4-H, but again, I want you to understand that the video was not created for this presentation. None of the videos were. We just went to grab something that illustrated the point, and it illustrated it in a way that was broad enough that even though it might be 4-H, that you can see some of your organizations that you work with and pull out those key pieces and go, yeah, that's something that we do. So we're going to watch this real quick little clip, and it's about how a group of 4-Hers solved the problem of a library that was hit and destroyed in a tornado. Short little couple-minute thing.
On the 25th of April, during a really bad storm, lightning struck our library. It was a total loss. A total loss isn't just the loss of the building. The library was just an invaluable tool, and without it, the playing field was suddenly not quite so level in Twiggs County.
It was a devastating news to hear that the library had burned. My initial reaction was, what do we do now?
We found out that the Twiggs County library system recently had a fire. As 4-Hers, we did what came natural by trying to find a way to raise funds for them so that they can start the process of rebuilding.
You know, the library is more than just a housing facility for books. It's an indication of our life, our quality of life. I think the library is the heartbeat of the county.
We had over 700 4-Hers from all across the state of Georgia, and we held a book drive, and the funds that we gained from the book drive were donated to the Twiggs County Library System.
I've learned through this project is that one small action plan can make a difference in one full community.
I think that the community in Twiggs County is excited that the young people saw this as a need, and I think people are just getting more interested and more involved in this project because of the revolution of responsibility that the youth started here.
So what we did was took a group of 4-Hers from a statewide 4-H program and all worked together to focus on one common goal that took place within one small community.
It has a very powerful emotional impact on me as mayor and on the whole community.
I can't begin to explain the importance of 4-H not only to Twiggs County, but to the region and to the state. They are heroes.
I'm Jawan, and I'm making an impact in my community.
I'm Whitney, and I am helping to bring resources to Twiggs County.
I'm Jennifer, and I want you to join my revolution of responsibility.
And Deb, is the mic back on? Deb, as we go through the videos and the presentation, I'm just remembering a lot of the themes that Mandy Savitz-Romer cited this morning, and you can see some of them exemplified in this video. For example, the idea of planning, the idea of future orientation, of
Problem solving,
responsive to community. So I just want to highlight that.
Yep. Well, and I think this sets the stage for looking at what we wanted to sort of bring up as our second point that Michael highlighted, and that's this idea of out-of-school time as a critical learning site. And I'm kind of a quote person, and I really like this quote from Gordon. And to me, the sort of the critical point of this is that learning doesn't just happen in schoolrooms. And I think everybody sort of intuitively knows that, but when we start talking about learning, somehow we automatically migrate to that most familiar frame in our brains, which is classroom. It's in a building. It's, a teacher rows, little kids sitting at desks. And I think that when we start looking at that we need to help shift that frame. At our meeting yesterday, we talked about framing, and I think that we need to look at creating a new frame around what is learning, what is education, and where it happens. Having come from the academic setting myself, I was a high school teacher and then a college professor for 20 years. I know that teachers are incredibly challenged to just do it all. We're supposed to be content experts, and that's our, quote, primary job. But any of you who've been in the classroom know that you are also asked to be a developmental specialist, you're an ethicist, you're a mediator, you're a nutritionist, and at times, you are an entertainer. And so I think that when we start looking at this idea of learning, the public, and even some of us in the academy, either overlook or sometimes disregard this concept of whole child learning, and we forget that the out-of-classroom experiences that happen that's really the majority of a lot of our kids' lives, are out there happening in some really important learning sites and in activities. And when we start looking at why this is important, as Mandy was talking about, what she was talking about, there's buzzwords around this, so language gets in the way sometimes. Is it 21st century learning skills? Is it non-cognitive, which I just really don't like that word, but non-cognitive skill? Is it life skills? Is it character development? I think when you start looking at all this, I will go back to a term that we used when we were looking at setting this up, and one of the learners, big three, was this idea of life skills development. And when we look at that, I think that we're getting a lot of attention now around that area, partly because of Tufts' book, but Tony Wagner did some stuff back in 2004 and 2005 around achievement gap, and all of those to raise this idea that the academic content is important, but so are a lot of other learning experiences that a child goes through that will contribute to that. So when we look at this idea of practice, I think that sometimes we get caught up in the rhetoric and we forget what we're really going back to. But as Mandy said, we're looking at things like resilience, social skills, grit, the ability to problem solve, to do this creative, critical thinking, and that is really key for young people to have those skills. But it doesn't all have to happen within the classroom. And so what we're advocating up here is to look and become better partners and collaborators. If out-of-school time experiences are offering these sorts of experiences, which we do, then how can we best bring that and make that available to the academic setting that that child goes into in terms of schools? How can we better work with teachers? How can we better support what's being done in those activities and get beyond the rhetoric and really get into, you know, how we're going to make this better and give that child the best learning experience that we possibly can. And when we look at trying to look at not only academic success, Michael and I would both say we need to advocate for how this also is going to contribute to workforce development. If any of you have read some of the reports that have come out from business, you know that they are crying for people to pay attention to the fact that they oftentimes have a workforce that doesn't know some of the things that we've taken for granted. Time management, the ability to work with other people, the ability to have discipline, the ability to fail at something and pick yourself up and continue to persevere until you do get to a point of being able to successfully complete a project. So these kinds of things, I think, are really important that happen in those out-of-school time experiences that are contributing to the total learning of the child and really does help support this other area that we have a lot of need in. And lastly, on my little section here, I wanted to talk and give you a little visual around how we think out-of-school time programs really do encourage life skills. If you think about any experiences that your kids, or maybe it's, if you don't have kids, it's your nieces and nephews or whoever, when they go and do some of these out-of-school time experiences and activities, they come back and it's like, wow, this was really fun. They could be building with Legos to create some kind of little robotics project. They could be out in a camp somewhere learning about this whole wonderful outdoor space that they happen to be in, and it's fun and it's exciting and it's opportunities to learn, and sometimes they don't even realize they're learning, which to me is pretty cool because it makes learning, somehow learning has gotten constructed as something that maybe is not fun and is maybe kind of boring. And I think, again, we have opportunities to switch that up. And if we look at what's really happening there in those out-of-school time experiences that encourage the development of these life skills that we've been talking about, they are these things that offer leadership opportunities. There's peer interactions. There's the safe environment that that child can come into. It's being able to look at identifying interests, at finding out a little bit more about who you are and what you like, and providing some opportunities to really explore that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, to me, one of the big pieces to this are these supportive adult staff that are working with the kids and building these supportive relationships. And I think it kind of culminates into something that has been out in the literature talked about as the third learning space, where learning can happen anytime, any place, any path, and at any kind of pace. And it really focuses on this idea of fun and joy in learning. And I think that out-of-school time can offer these opportunities and be able to help connect them for that child in a way that is supportive of what they're trying to do when they go back into the classroom, when they're looking at their academics and the pathway that that offers them. So I'm going to show you, again, a short video that looks at, it comes from the ACA, the American Camp Association, but it's a real quick one that just says something about adults looking back on an experience and how they think about that and how that's been important to them.
Because of camp, I learned to make lasting friendships with people I still keep in touch with today.
Because of camp, I learned about self-esteem.
Because of camp, I play guitar.
I learned to be a team player.
I learned about diversity.
Because of camp, I am sending my kids to camp this summer.
I learned how to play guitar, I learned how to canoe, I learned how to fish.
I learned that I was the best Tarzan yeller in the camp.
Because of camp, I became a counselor.
I learned how to take care of the environment.
Because of camp, I learned to navigate the world.
I was good in school for a whole year so that I could go back to camp.
Because of camp, I got a personality. Now I'm...
Because of camp, I turned out just fine.
Well, of course, we know you're all learning a lot because you're having fun and laughing, so that's a good indicator right there. The third pillar of what we're talking about today is this idea of youth-adult partnerships, and this is really critical. Relationships are really important. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for the prompt. It's a little far from the mic. Youth-adult partnerships are a really critical pillar in the effectiveness of the common impact of youth programs, and also we think it does cross over, once again, into the educational realm and into the workforce development realm. As Deb was saying before, and as Mandy was alluding to earlier, learning how to work with others is really important. Collaboration and teamwork. Many of the tech companies today operate on this model, and some of the experiences that youth have in youth programs can help them develop the kinds of life skills and prepare them for that kind of work, and also for working with others to succeed academically. I don't need to read this slide, but I just wanted to tell you that in this section we're drawing on the work of Shep Selden, who's at the University of Wisconsin, and there are others in the youth development field like Reed Larson, who's done a lot of work on youth and adults in programs and who has authority. Also, Bart Hirsch, who had done some pretty in-depth studies of boys and girls clubs and the importance of the sense of home and the relationships with the adults there. And then some of the work that we had done in Girl Scouting too, about how the process of the program and the way girls and adults interact and girls with each other really makes a big difference in the outcomes that happen from the program. So Shep Selden thinks of this as a core practice, and that's an important concept. It's not just a nice to have, it's a really critical element. And in good youth-adult partnerships, what you typically see is authentic decision-making, where there's youth in a developmentally appropriate way are engaged in making decisions in conjunction with discussions with the adults in the program, that often there are natural mentors. I think we kind of saw a little bit of that earlier in the video about Lightning Started Our Revolution and the library idea. What probably happened in that situation is there were adults and youth who came together over the problem, and there was some mentoring going on. Reciprocal activity, the give and take that you saw in the first video in particular. And in the first video, I think also exemplified the sense of community connectedness that's really important in these partnerships. And finally in this section, just to underscore that good youth-adult partnerships, whether it's with staff or with volunteers, and Deb, you forgot to say volunteers before I was drilling you on that one. Some organizations operate on volunteers more than staff, but whatever it is, a critical piece that's been borne out time and again from the research is the idea of creating a safe space, safe place. And that doesn't mean safety in the sense of you're harbored from something. What it means is that there's room for exploration and development and even risk-taking and failure and challenges as well. In the youth-adult partnerships, it involves peer dynamics too, and that's really important to keep in mind. We've seen that in some of the research with the Girl Scout work. The girl group and the way in which that's facilitated is really important. And as I mentioned before, we need to think about how to scale these youth-adult partnerships in a developmental way. We know that when youth are younger, often what they need is supportive adults. Adults that care about them, adults that are nice to them, adults that help them feel safe. As they move through middle school and adolescence, it's more about not necessarily providing the close comfort, but providing the structure and the resources for youth to launch off and take those risks and take on the challenges that they're facing. So we're going to tee up a video in a minute. Let me just preface this a little bit. As Deb said before, all the videos we're showing today were not made for this conference. They were made for other purposes. The video I'm going to show you is an example from Girl Scouting, and it's of Brownie Girl Scouts. And those of you who are familiar with Brownie Girl Scouts will know that that's 8- and 9-year-olds who, in Purvis, Mississippi, who identified a community need. And it's, a pretty small community need in a sense, but it's really striking that they noticed that there was something missing from their community. And as we go through this video, towards the second half, I just want you to listen to the volunteer who's talking, Teresa Mitchell, because our researchers, when they visited this site, found that the youth-adult interaction influenced her as much as it influenced the kids. It really opened her eyes to the idea that girls could be leaders in their community, and she, as a woman, could have an impact on her community. And then also listen to the mayor and what he has to say about the girls. Warning, high cuteness factor on this one, so take that into account as you're watching.
Hi, I'm Teresa Mitchell. I have been a Girl Scout leader for 12 years and volunteer for 15 years. This year, my Girl Scout Brownies are doing the World of Girls journey. I was not real excited about the journey to begin with. I was a little bit concerned, didn't know how it would go across, didn't know exactly what to do. Took the training and became more comfortable with the journeys and saw that it was more of a leadership-driven development for the girls, and that through using the journeys, the girls started gaining more power and they had more of a voice.
Well, today we're dedicating a handicapped swing in the park, so people that are handicapped can swing in the park too and have fun.
We were invited today to come to Purvis to join in a celebration of where our troops in Purvis came together, identified a need in their community, and put our journeys and our curriculum into practice with Take Action. Each girl has a story to tell about why they've selected this project and how they've brought it to reality.
All girls have stories. The story we found is about the swing.
We were working on the journey, World of Girls, and we were looking for clues actually in our community of different things that we could do. And the girls had noticed, one of the girls had noticed there was not a handicapped swing in the park.
We wanted the park to be for everybody. I know a couple people that are handicapped and they can't usually play at the park. We wanted to help change our town and make it better.
Then we needed to go and find out if the city would let us put a handicapped swing in the park and get their approval.
Well, they came in with the expectations of wanting to put a swing in the park for handicapped children because they wanted to let handicapped children have the same privileges that they have. They wanted to spend their own money, buy their own swing, put it in the city park, which is fine. I mean, it's outstanding for them to step up and be young leaders of the community like that.
We asked the mayor if we could put up a swing in the city park, and he said yes. They said they wanted to help us get the money because, you know, they cost a lot.
I've been there 19 years, and some of those young girls handled themselves better than grown-ups. I mean, they were first class. They did an excellent job. They were not shy. They were not intimidated. I mean, it was just outstanding. It was very good.
It was hard work. I'm really proud of everybody.
This project was girl-led completely, with the direction of volunteers that allowed the girls to have a voice.
Through use of the journeys, the girls are working together. They're also becoming more independent. They want to do more things, and if you give them that opportunity, they'll do it.
In Mississippi, we say we're moving at the speed of girls, and we are trying to keep up with these girls because everywhere we look, wonderful things are happening.
One person can make a big difference out of the whole world.
When we work together, it's easier to make the world a better place.
All right, so we had that little musical flourish at the end to get you stimulated during your lunch break. Setting aside the cuteness factor, I think you see several of the themes that we were talking about earlier and that Mandy was talking about this morning cropping up again. And know that in about 10 to 13 years, some of these young ladies are going to be interns and congressional staffers here. And I think they probably have an open door to the mayor's office at this point, which is part of the whole point here. As Deb and Suzanne and I were talking about the three pillars for the common success of youth programs, we also recognize that there's a bridge over to some of the educational concerns. And there's a paper that Elizabeth Devaney and Nicole Yohalam from the Forum for Youth Investment had written, and it's up on the Forum for Youth Investment website. It was published last year in 2012 about the overlap between out-of-school time programs and what they do and the Common Core state educational standards. And those of you who are familiar with the Common Core standards know that there's some discussion in there about habits of mind and kinds of behaviors and approaches to learning that will help students succeed. Also that there's the sense, as Deb said before, that learning can happen anytime, anywhere. So there's this bridge and crossing between the academic and the extracurricular as well. As far as habits of mind go, some of the things that were listed in the paper under the literacy and the math section, just listen to these words and then tell me if you think they sound like what we were just talking about in youth development programs. One of them is make sense of problems and perseveres in solving them. That's a lot of what we've been seeing on the videos. Constructs viable arguments and critiques the reasoning of others. Well, the girl's argument with the mayor seemed to work pretty well. Demonstrates independence. Responds to varying demands of audience, task, purpose, and discipline. So this is under literacy and math, but it sounds a lot like the youth program elements. And then comes to understand the perspectives of others and other cultures. So we just wanted to point out that there's a bridge between these different areas of work that maybe hasn't been looked at closely together before. Deb, you want to take this one?
Yeah, within the Collab Researchers Group, we come together, we're representing many different youth organizations, and unlike what some people might think goes on there, we are the least turf protection people on the planet, I think. We get together, we share all kinds of ideas, and we try to find ways that we can collaborate and build on what each other are doing. And as we were looking at one of our opportunities, we thought it would be kind of interesting to see what each of our organizations were doing around some outcomes, with the idea of lifting up our commonalities and not losing the uniquenesses that each one of our programs have, but this idea that as organizations, we shared a lot of the same interests and concerns. And so I think they're at your place, there's a shared vision for youth. The researchers group, we surveyed ourselves. We looked at the outcomes. Being researchers,
we had to survey ourselves.
Well, yeah, of course.
Back in 2010.
I mean, being the good researchers that we are, we needed data, right? So, and one of the things that we really liked in this opportunity was we used the Ready by 21 framework, and those are those 5 boxes that you see up there. You can see it better on within your little publication there. But the bottom line on this is that we really were, as organizations, keying in on some really important areas. And if you look particularly under the productive thing with the learning and the working, that's exactly what this conference is talking about today. We were looking at this learning piece, we're looking at workforce development, and we found some really strong commonalities here. So we just offer this to you as something to look at, to see, and to share in here sort of our excitement around the impact you know, if I look at what ACA can do, yes, I believe we have an impact. If I look at what, you know, what 4-H is doing or any other of the individual organizations, yeah, we all have an impact. But what was the coolest part of all about this is that when we put all of our collective efforts together, then our impact was much, much greater than any one. So the collective whole has a much bigger impact, a much bigger influence sphere to work in than any one of us individually could do. And I think that is a really important message. And again, for this summit today, that opportunity to come together, our impact can be much greater when we put all of our voices together on this. So we wanted to share that little piece with you before we left.
Okay. And let me just ask a question of Ed. Ed, how are we doing on time at this point?
We're running behind.
Running behind. Okay, so we were going to do a table discussion exercise at this point with this piece, but I think we'll forego that. But the idea is that we wanted to ask you to think about, even though the context of all our work may differ, you know, many of the goals that we have are the same, or at least in alignment, or could be in alignment, and that there are potentially a lot of partnerships between out-of-school time programs, education, and workforce preparation or workforce development groups. And the question was, how could we work together to optimize this? So we won't have time. I was going to ask you to turn to a neighbor and discuss it. Maybe at the break you could discuss that. And then there's an email address at the end on this next slide. Irv Katz, I'm going to send you into Irv Katz's inbox. In the spirit of collaboration, any suggestions you have from what we were just saying in that previous slide, why don't you send them in, and then Irv, if you could share them back out through Ed and Don and Ryan and the rest of the group, and figure out how to perhaps distill some of the ideas that were suggested back to the whole audience later on. That'd be a great thing. So with that, we'd like to wrap up, and thank you very much.
Yeah, what we're going to do is, as Michael addressed, we want you to send questions in through those cards to Irv for the National Collaboration for Youth. That's going to include the presentation you just saw, presentations to come, and more importantly, questioning how you can better benefit from the National Collab. So think of that holistically. This is a real opportunity for us to bring together our areas of interest. But I want to preface it because this was such an exceptional presentation. I thank you both for the videos, both for the entertainment quality as well as the edible nutrition.
They're available for free on YouTube, actually, all of them. Each of the lots of organizations have their own
Let's take
channels.
a couple of questions
So go watch
while
them
we're
again.
here.
Okay.
Raise your hand, Bob.
Real quickly, in our InTech study, the maker movement sounds like it's something perfectly made for this situation. Could you comment on what's going on with making?
Sure. Okay, so the question was about the maker movement, and it's perfect. And maker movement, actually, I don't know how this happened. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So just as an aside, I got a new dehumidifier, and no, I'm not going off topic here. Got a new dehumidifier last week, opened up the owner's manual, and it said, do not attempt to repair this unit. None of these parts are serviceable by the user. Send them back to the manufacturer if you have any problems. But the maker is exactly the opposite, which is about how people can construct their own technologies and also how they can kind of participate and build in their own lives. And I think a lot of these youth programs that we were talking about and the kinds of engagement that happens, whether it's in person or digital, lends itself to the youth participating in constructing those experiences. And we could go on and give some examples of different programs that do that now, but Deb, do you want to comment further on that?
No, I think that, I mean, what you've said is actually quite on target, and you might even think about for us in the camping world, it's so experientially based learning, but we have been on and looking at maker camps. They're out there. People are getting into that area, and it's a challenge to try and figure out exactly how to work with these opportunities as they crop up, because they just, you know, there's so many new technologies that are out there to help out. So, yep, it's there.
Known as the human hyperlink, we can connect you to the resources that you need to do maker camps. My question was not, we can find friendships. How do we shift and touch the mindset, culture, policymakers to understand the importance of the out of school, but then move to how to integrate it for the partnership of in and out? And has that been addressed?
Did everyone hear Ronnie's question? In the back, could you hear her? Okay, she has a good voice. You project really well, Ronnie. I'm just going to throw that question to the whole audience for discussion at the break, because that's a terrific question.
You know, I'm going to chime in on that, because that is the undercurrent of what we're talking about today. So there, unfortunately, I don't think there is a wholesome, holistic answer to that.
No.
The answer is our individual realities and how do we define it. So I think your answer is appropriate. Let's discuss it among ourselves. I think the modus operandi of the index cards plays well to that, and using the National Collab, particularly the research group, as the centrifuge to stir these ideas, I think is totally appropriate. So at this point in time, I want to thank this panel, Michael, Deb,
Suzanne.
And Suzanne. And note, oh, I have to refrain from making a political comment here, I'm sure.
No,
okay,
no.
I almost blurted something out, but we're sorry that she's not here today. And we
for
wish she
reasons
were.
beyond our control.
Yeah.
For reasons beyond her control.
The next session is going to be a continuum of this, also with National Collaboration for Youth, members of the research group. And I think it's really pertinent to keep in mind, we've been talking about how to define the common elements. The next session is going to focus on what is success, because if you haven't defined what victory is, you won't be able to declare it. Enjoy a short break. When you see me back up here, I expect to see you down there.
Okay.